My parents informed me that my sister's family would be moving into my home, so I made the decision to sell it without mentioning anything to them. During a family dinner, my parents announced that my sister, Mia, and her 2 children would be relocating to my place. I kept quiet, waiting for the moment they arrived with their belongings, completely unaware that I had sold my house a month prior. I've always felt like the underdog in my family, not the favorite, not the shining star, just Alex the accountant. My sister Mia, on the other hand, has always been the center of our parents' attention. Growing up, Mia received the newest bike while I settled for her hand-me-downs. On birthdays, she would get the latest smartphone, while I was gifted books or clothes. In high school, Mom and Dad attended every single one of Mia's school events, but they only made it to one of my debate competitions, the finals, which I won, by the way. Even then, they spent half the time discussing how proud they were of Mia. Grandpa's will was just the icing on the cake of a lifetime of favoritism. Mia inherited the spacious 4-bedroom house in the desirable part of town, while I was left with a modest 2-bedroom on the outskirts of the suburbs. I once overheard Mom pleading with Grandpa to leave Mia the larger house. "Please," she had said, "Mia's going to have a family someday, she needs the space. Alex will be fine with the smaller house." I never voiced my grievances. What would be the point? In our family, Mia was always the priority, and that was simply how things were. So, I wasn't surprised when, during our monthly family dinner, Mia and her husband, Jake, dramatically cleared their throats and announced they had significant news. "We've decided to sell our house," Mia said, beaming. I nearly choked on my drink. "We're investing in an incredible opportunity," Jake added, practically bouncing in his seat. "Mia's friend, Sam, has this amazing business venture, and we're getting in on the ground floor." Mom and Dad clapped their hands in delight. "Oh, how wonderful!" Mom exclaimed. "What kind of business venture?" I asked cautiously. "It's complicated," Mia replied, waving her hand dismissively. "Sam is starting a tech platform that connects investors with startups. It's going to revolutionize the venture capital world. We're going to make so much money. Sam projects a 300% return in the first year alone." 300%? I repeated, setting down my fork. "That sounds suspicious. Look, you guys have 2 small kids, Lily is only 5, and Max just turned 3. Are you sure selling your house is the best move? Maybe you should invest some savings instead." The atmosphere in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Jake snorted loudly, and Mia gave me the condescending smile I had known my entire life. "Alex," she said slowly, as if explaining something to a child, "I know you mean well, but I studied finance at Crestwood University. You're just an accountant who took community college classes. I think I understand entrepreneurship a bit better than you do." I bit my tongue. What Mia never mentioned was that she barely graduated from Crestwood, while I had graduated with honors and had been promoted twice in 5 years at my firm. Besides, Mia continued, Grandpa gave me the bigger house for a reason. He always knew I had a better head for business. This is exactly the kind of opportunity he would have wanted me to seize. I could have told her right then that Grandpa had only given her the larger house because Mom had practically begged him to. I could have pointed out that Grandpa, who built his modest wealth through careful saving and conservative investments, would have been horrified at the idea of Mia selling her house to invest in some big tech venture. I could have mentioned that Sam had already cycled through 3 failed startups in the past 5 years. But why bother? Mia was an adult, she and Jake had made their decision, and frankly, after a lifetime of playing second fiddle, I wasn't feeling particularly inclined to save her from herself. "You're right," I said instead, taking another sip of water. "It's your decision." Mom beamed at Mia. "We're so proud of you for taking this leap," she said. "It takes courage to seize an opportunity like this." Dad nodded in agreement. "Your grandfather would be proud too." For the rest of dinner, Mia and Jake talked about all the things they planned to do with their newfound wealth, traveling the world, buying a vacation home, putting the kids in private school. I stayed quiet, nodding and smiling when appropriate. Meanwhile, I mentally went through my renovation plans for my own small house. I had been systematically updating it room by room, using money I'd saved from my boring accountant job. Last month, things were bound to change any day now. I wandered into the kitchen to grab a glass of water, and Dad followed me in. How bad is it? I asked quietly. Dad sighed, running a hand through his thinning hair. They've burned through everything. The apartment costs $4,000 a month, and the car payment is another $1,500. They couldn't keep up, he said, his expression darkening. As for the investment, he shook his head. Jason keeps saying they're on the verge of a breakthrough, but I have a bad feeling about it. Over the next few weeks, I watched from a distance as Mia scrambled to find work. Eventually, she took a job at a car dealership, a significant step down from her previous banking position, but at least it was something. Meanwhile, Jake tried to maintain a brave face, posting carefully curated photos on social media that made it seem like everything was fine. But everything was far from fine. My parents' modest retirement home wasn't designed for 6 people. One evening, Mom called me, sounding exhausted. Riley, sweetie, I hate to ask, but... She hesitated. We're struggling a bit with groceries for extra mouths to feed. I knew what was coming. How much do you need? I asked. Oh, anything would help, she said quickly. We're just a bit tight this month. I promised to transfer some money right away, settling on $600, enough to help but not enough to strain my own budget. When I told her the amount, she thanked me profusely, though I could hear a hint of disappointment in her voice. She had clearly been hoping for more. The next month, I received another call, and then another. The $600 monthly transfer became a regular occurrence. I didn't mind helping, but I couldn't help but notice that Mia and Jake still managed to keep the Porsche despite their financial troubles. Priorities, I guess. One night, I attended my cousin Sarah's birthday party. It was a welcome break from the family drama, or so I thought, until my Aunt Linda cornered me by the dessert table. Riley, dear, she whispered, glancing around to ensure no one was listening. How are you holding up with all this Mia business? I shrugged. I'm just trying to help where I can. Aunt Linda leaned in closer. Well, you should know that your parents are at their wits' end. They love Mia, of course, but having them all there is taking a toll. She took a sip of her wine. And between you and me, they've got a plan to fix things. Something in her tone made my stomach clench. What kind of plan? They want to move Mia and her family into your house, she said bluntly. Your mom thinks it makes perfect sense since you live alone in a 2-bedroom. I nearly dropped my plate. What? They're saying it would just be for a few months, but Aunt Linda shook her head. Sheila told me they're hoping you'll eventually just move out and let Mia have the place. I stood there frozen as Aunt Linda squeezed my arm sympathetically. I thought you should know, it didn't seem right, them plotting behind your back. The party continued around me, but I barely noticed. All I could think about was the audacity of it all. They weren't just planning to ask me to take in Mia's family, they were planning to push me out of my own home. As I drove home that night, my mind raced. I knew what was coming, the guilt trips, the family pressure, the inevitable it's just temporary that would somehow become permanent. Once Mia and her family moved in, I'd be expected to pay the bills, clean up after them, and eventually give up my own space entirely. No, not this time. I wasn't going to let them take advantage of me again. When I got home, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat at my kitchen table, thinking. By the time the glass was empty, I had a plan. The next morning, I walked into my boss Dave's office without an appointment. He looked up from his computer, surprised. Riley, everything okay? Remember that accounting position at the Pittsburgh branch? I asked, not bothering with small talk. Is it still open? I want the job. Dave leaned back in his chair, studying me. That's a senior position, Riley. More responsibility, different environment. It's a big move. I'm ready for it, I said. I've been here 5 years. I've consistently exceeded my targets, my performance reviews are excellent. I'm qualified. Dave nodded thoughtfully. Well, I can't say I want to lose you here, he said with a smile. You'd be great for the position. Let me make a few calls. He paused. I kept only what would fit in 2 suitcases, enough clothes for a couple of weeks, my laptop, and a few personal items. The day after the movers left, I checked into a modest hostel downtown. It felt strange sleeping in a twin bed with strangers in the room, but it was only temporary, just 3 more days until I flew to Pittsburgh. Saturday evening arrived, and I drove to my parents' house for the last time. I parked a block away, not wanting my packed car to give anything away. As I walked up the familiar path to the front door, I took a deep breath. This was it, the confrontation I had been avoiding my whole life. Mom answered the door with a tight smile. "Riley, good. You're here. We're just about to serve dinner." Inside, the atmosphere was strained. Dad sat at the head of the table, looking uncomfortable. Mia and Jake were there too, both wearing expressions that attempted to be pleasant but came across as smug. The kids were nowhere to be seen. We exchanged a few empty phrases, and finally, Mom set down her fork. "Riley, honey, we wanted to talk to you about your house." "What about it?" I asked innocently. "Well," Mom continued, her voice taking on that persuasive tone she had used my entire life whenever she wanted me to give something up for Mia's benefit, "your father and I have been thinking it might make sense for Mia and her family to stay with you for a little while, just until they get back on their feet." I looked at Mia, who was studying her plate, and Jake, who was watching me with a hint of challenge in his eyes. "For how long?" I asked, knowing full well what the answer would be. Mia shrugged. "Not sure yet. Things are starting to look up with the investment, though. Jason says we're due for a big breakthrough any day now." I had to suppress a laugh. 3 months later, and she was still clinging to that fantasy. "I don't think that's a good idea," I said, my voice tighter than I intended. "I mean, my house is pretty small. There are only 2 bedrooms. You could take the smaller bedroom and give them the master," Mom suggested quickly. "Or maybe you could stay with a friend for a bit, just until things settle down." I opened my mouth to argue further, then caught myself. What was the point? In a few days, I'd be gone, and this would all be moot. Better to let them think they'd won for now. I sighed heavily, shoulders slumping in what I hoped looked like defeat. "Fine," I said flatly. "When are they planning to move in?" Mom looked surprised, clearly having expected more resistance. "Well, we were thinking next weekend." "Would that work?" "Sure," I said, picking up my food disinterestedly. "I guess I'll start packing up some of my things." Mia and Jake exchanged triumphant glances, and Mom looked relieved. Dad still wouldn't meet my eyes. The rest of dinner passed in a blur. Mom, Dad, Mia, and Jake started discussing logistics, what furniture would stay, what would go into storage, whether my home office could be converted into a playroom for the kids. I mostly pushed food around my plate, offering one-word responses when directly addressed. After dessert, I stood up. I should get going. Lots to do if I'm moving out next weekend. As I walked to the door, I heard them continue their conversation, voices dropping to hushed tones but still audible. "I told you she'd agree," Mom was saying. "Riley's always been reasonable." "Should we help her pack her stuff?" Dad asked. "No need," Jake replied. "Most of it can just stay in the garage. It's not like she has anything valuable." "We'll need to get a new couch," Mia added. "That old thing she has kills my back." I closed the front door quietly behind me, their voices fading as I walked away. They had already forgotten I was there, already planning how to take over my space, erase my presence, and replace my things with theirs. But little did they know, there would be nothing for them to take over. Back at the hostel, I checked my phone to find a text from Mom. "Thank you for understanding, sweetie. Your sister is so grateful." I didn't reply. Instead, I sent a quick message to Jenna, confirming that everything was on track with the house closing. She replied immediately, "All good. New owners get keys on Thursday." The next morning, I woke up early, checked out of the hostel, and headed to the airport. As the plane took off, carrying me toward my new life in Pittsburgh, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders. My new apartment would be ready in 2 days, and my new job started in a week. Exactly 1 week after I left town, I was unpacking the last of my kitchen boxes when my phone exploded with notifications. 27 missed calls in the span of 2 hours, 15 from mom, 8 from dad, and 4 from Mia, plus dozens of text messages, each more frantic than the last. I knew exactly what had happened. Today was the day Mia and her family were supposed to move into my house. I could picture it perfectly, Mia pulling up with a rented truck full of their belongings, knocking on the door, and finding strangers living there. I poured myself a glass of wine and settled onto my new couch, debating whether to respond or simply block their numbers. Before I could decide, my phone rang again. Mom! Against my better judgment, I answered. Riley Elizabeth Harper. My mother's voice was so loud I had to hold the phone away from my ear. What have you done? Hello to you too, Mom, I said calmly, taking a sip of wine. Don't you dare act innocent. Mia just went to your house with a moving truck, and there's another family living there. They said they bought it 2 weeks ago. That's correct, I replied. The Andersons, a lovely couple with 2 teenage kids. They got a great deal. There was a stunned silence. You sold your house without telling anyone? How could you do something so underhanded? I nearly choked on my wine. Underhanded? That's rich coming from the person who was planning to push me out of my own home. Another silence, then in a much quieter voice, where are you? Pittsburgh. I got a promotion, senior accountant at the branch office here. Her voice cracked. So you just left without saying goodbye? Without telling anyone? Kind of like how you were planning to kick me out of my own house without asking first, I pointed out. That was different. Mom insisted. We're family. We needed your help. No, Mom. Mia and Jake needed a bailout for their bad decisions, and instead of holding them accountable, you decided I should be the one to sacrifice again. Like always. That's not fair. Isn't it? My entire life, it's been Mia first, Riley second. When we needed new school clothes, Mia got the expensive ones. When we both had events, you went to hers. When Grandpa died, Mia got the nice house because you convinced him she deserved it more. And now, when Mia screwed up royally with her and Jake's stupid financial decisions, your solution is to take away my house, my home that I worked for, that I've been fixing up room by room with my own money. No, not this time. The line went quiet for so long I thought she might have hung up. Then, in a voice colder than I'd ever heard from her, she said, I don't know who you think you're talking to, young lady, but I am still your mother, and as of this moment, I no longer consider you my daughter. I prepared myself for anger, for guilt trips, for manipulation, but this still hurt more than I expected. I think we both know that's always been the case, Mom, I said quietly. Oh, and I'm canceling the monthly transfers, the $600 I've been sending for Mia's family. That's done. She went silent again, and I could practically hear the gears turning in her head, her anger at me versus her need for my money. We don't want your money, she finally said, but her voice lacked conviction. Good, because you're not getting it anymore. Goodbye, Mom. I hung up before she could respond and blocked her number. Then I blocked Dad, Mia, and Jake for good measure. Almost immediately, my phone buzzed with texts from unfamiliar numbers, Mia using Dad's phone, Mom using a friend's. I turned off my phone completely and finished my wine in peaceful silence. The next day, I bought a new phone with a new number. I shared it only with my closest friends, my new colleagues, and a few extended family members I still trusted, like Aunt Linda, who sent me a congratulatory bouquet when I told her what I'd done. 6 months passed. I thrived in my new position, made new friends, and dated a bit, nothing serious. Most importantly, I lived life on my own terms, without the shadow of my family's expectations hanging over me. Occasionally, I thought about them. I wondered if Mia and her family were still living with my parents, if the investment had ever paid off. I doubted it. I wondered if Mom and Dad were still covering their expenses. I wondered if they ever reflected on how they treated me, if they ever regretted it. But mostly, I didn't think about them at all. One Sunday morning, as I was enjoying coffee on my balcony, my phone rang, a number I didn't recognize but with my hometown.